Hello and welcome to another episode of Guess That Record. I am your host, Jackson Reed. This is the show where we talk about music and try to figure out which album I pulled from my collection. Thanks again to you, the listeners, for tuning in to another episode. Our guest today is a music lawyer and executive best known for helping to launch the career of Nickelback. Following the band's early success, he co-founded 604 Records with Nickelback frontman Chad Kroeger. Some of the acts currently signed to the label include Carly Rae Jepsen and Marianas Trench. I'm super excited to welcome Jonathan Simkin to Guess That Record. How are you doing, Jonathan?
I'm good. How are you?
I'm doing good. So you're in Vancouver, is that right?
I am sitting in my office in the headquarters of 604 Records in beautiful Vancouver, British Columbia. Yes.
Awesome. And is that your hometown as well?
Grew up here. Pretty much have lived here my whole life, except I did go to law school in Ontario. So I stuck around there. I got called to the bar in Ontario, and I did stick around there for 6 or 7 years. But other than that period in my 20s, I've lived in Vancouver my whole life.
Right. And yeah, it's great to be speaking with you today because, 604 Records has been such a success, and I'm really excited to get to speak with you about your career.
Well, thank you. I'm always a little amazed when people even notice. It's when you're on the West Coast and you're sort of out of the maelstrom of the sort of music business, which is centered in Canada, clearly in Toronto. That's where all the major labels are. That's where all the streaming services are. That's where a lot of the big independent labels are. When you're out in the West Coast, you feel a little separated from everything. I think that's been good for us in some ways, not good in other ways. But we're definitely sort of feel that. We feel that we're not in the middle of everything.
Absolutely. Yeah. Now, I always love to start out the interviews by asking, what was the first song or the first album that you remember hearing that made you take music seriously?
Oh my goodness. The first record I ever bought, and I still have it, so that's got to be over, oh good God, that's got to be 50 years ago. That's crazy. Was Don't Shoot Me, I'm Only the Piano Player by Elton John.
Mm-hmm.
I loved the song Daniel. Daniel, my brother.
Yep.
And I was obsessed with it. And obviously, that's long before the internet, long before Spotify. So, I begged my parents, and they bought the album for me. And that was also the first concert I ever went to. Was Elton John at the Pacific Coliseum. I'm not even sure what year that would have been, but I would have been. Boy, I was probably still in elementary school. It's a long time ago.
Nice. Great choice. And now, sort of when I was doing all my research for the interview here, you didn't actually start out with the intention of being in the music business. Is that correct?
Yes. I mean, I've always been a huge music fan. My parents were very into music. My older brother was really into music. So I was around music a lot. I never thought of it as a career. I never imagined I'd end up working in music as a career. That part was an accident, and literally just a fortuitous accident of me moving into an apartment building. I think it would have been 92. And my neighbors were in a band signed to Network. And I was just friends with them. It wasn't a business thing. I was doing poverty law. I was doing criminal law and refugee law, and was content doing that. Wasn't looking for a career change, but I ended up becoming very close to my neighbors, and I'd go to parties with them. Again, nothing to do with business, just fun. And I met a bunch of musicians at all these parties, and that's when Network was really sort of the label in Vancouver. I mean, they had Grapes of Wrath and Sarah McLachlan and Skinny Puppy and on and on and on and on. And so, I'd go to parties with them and I'd have all these musicians kind of, coming up to me. Hey, man, you don't look like a lawyer, man. That's cool. I got this contract. And I'd always be like, dude, I can't help you. I didn't even take copyright in law school. It's not what I do. Here's my card. If you get busted for pot or drunk driving or assault, give me a call. But the more bands were asking, the more I started to wonder, maybe that's an option career wise. And so eventually I said, you know what? Maybe I can give it a go. I was lucky because I worked for myself. I didn't work for a law firm, so I could do spec deals. I could do deals the bands could afford. And the first artist I really worked with was Matthew Good. And that was just a tip that somebody gave me. Hey, there's this great artist. Like, I hear you're trying to get into entertainment law a little bit. You should go check this artist out. And I did. And I basically offered him a deal that, give me 6 months to get you a record deal. If I get you a record deal, we'll work out a reasonable fee. And if I don't, you don't have to pay me a dime. And he agreed, and I got him a record deal. And that was kind of the start for me.
Yeah, for sure. And, it is interesting because, like, oftentimes when an artist is being pitched to a label, it's often, a manager or an agent or something, but quite often lawyers will do that. So how often does that happen, you would say?
The business has changed a lot, and I can comment more on what it was like then. Yeah, lawyers were, for many artists, crucial to that stage of going from local buzz to getting signed. And there were basically two of us in Canada who seemed to be quite good at getting record deals for bands. One of them was me, and one of them was Chris Taylor. And Chris was in Toronto, and I was in Vancouver. And so I tended to rep most of the West Coast artists, and Chris tended to rep most of the East side of the country artists. Once in a while, he would sneak in and grab something out from under my nose, like he repped Nelly Furtado, who's from Victoria. But I repped Len, the Steal My Sunshine band, who are in Toronto.
Right.
But the two of us sort of were the guys who were getting all these bands deals. And I believe that still happens now. The thing is, I'm not really that involved in that anymore. Like, that's not what I do anymore. I have a record company. Um, so, but as far as I know, that's still a big part of what, entertainment lawyers do. But one of the other changes in the business is there aren't as many big deals that go down like there used to be. It's a different business. Like when I was doing this in the 90s, early 2000s, CDs were still the thing. And the music industry was still making a ton of money. But that has changed. And, I was repping bands who were getting signed to deals even though they probably only had one good song. Because major labels at that point didn't really care. If you had one song that they could get on the radio, then, they could put it on a CD with a full album. And even if the album sucked other than the one single, you'd still have a good shot of, selling some records. So the business has changed so much now. When bands get signed now, it's often about one song that pops off on TikTok or pops off on Instagram or, pops off on YouTube. And for a lot of those artists, that's it. They have one song that does really well, and then that song eventually peters out, and their career kind of peters out with it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. This episode of Guess That Record is sponsored by Marvel Marketing. Marvel Marketing is an award-winning digital marketing company headquartered in Calgary, Alberta, Canada. Working with clients in different industries from all over North America, including Canada, the United States, and Mexico. Marvel Marketing services include website design and development, website maintenance, search engine optimization, public relations services, and social media management, amongst others. To find out more, visit marvelmarketing.ca. This episode of Guess That Record is sponsored by GuitarWorks. One of Canada's top independent music stores for over 30 years, GuitarWorks carries a huge selection of musical instruments from the biggest brands of music, including Gibson, Fender, Martin, Yamaha, and Paul Reed Smith. Visit any of their 3 Calgary locations or shop online at guitarworks.ca and join the Guitar Perks program to earn money back with every purchase. GuitarWorks, your total guitar store. This episode of Guess That Record is also sponsored by Recordland, home to the largest selection of music in Canada. Buy, sell, and trade tapes, CDs, and vinyl. Located in Calgary's Inglewood neighborhood on 9th Avenue Southeast, visit them in person or on Instagram at Recordland Calgary. And, kind of, I guess, keeping it sort of back in time, it was nice because on the podcast here, we a couple months ago, we did an interview with Jan Seidman. And, of course, he was sort of half of the Nickelback story. So I think it'd be great to hear your half of that story.
Yeah, okay, that's interesting. Yeah, so love Jan. Jan's a good dude. And gosh, it's so long ago. I need to remember what happened. Okay, so this would have been 98 or 99. And Nickelback had just recorded The State. And we had no real team other than the band and me. That was kind of it. And we, had the intent of trying to get a record deal in the States. And so I had all my connections that I had. And God, I don't even think there was email then, was there? I
It might have been.
Might have just been starting, but I remember sitting with Ryan Peake from Nickelback, literally in my office, stuffing CDs into envelopes and labeling them. We weren't sending them out via email, that's for sure. We were sending them out in the mail.
Mm-hmm.
And Jan was a name on a list. I don't even know if I knew him before that. I was doing my best because I was making a living getting bands deals. I had a nice sort of Rolodex with contact names for all sorts of people. He may have just been somebody I met in passing. I don't even remember. But, you try to get this band a deal. And so you send it everywhere. And, I sent it everywhere. I sent it to every record label that I had a connection with. And I sent it to Jan like I sent it to a million other people. And Jan called me. And he said, hey, I got this Nickelback record. He's like, I don't really think it's something for my company. Because I think he was doing publishing then.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't think this is really something for my company. But I think I know somebody who might dig this. And I was like, okay, like who? And he said, well, Roadrunner, he's like, do you know Roadrunner Records? I'm like, well, yeah, but aren't they like a metal label? And he said, yeah, but they just hired a new A&R guy that I know. And he's been empowered to find some stuff that's maybe a little more radio friendly. And I would love to send him this CD with your permission. And I said, go for it. Absolutely. And maybe 3 weeks later, the phone rings and it's Ron Berman at Roadrunner. I got this CD from Jan Seidman. I love it. What's the deal? Tell me about the band. And that's what led to them getting signed.
Yeah. Yeah.
Does that jive with Jan's story more or less?
I think it did. Yeah. No, for sure. I mean, the main thing was that you two got connected and it sort of took off from there basically.
That's true.
So, yeah. And then, Nickelback obviously blew up pretty quickly once everything fell into place. You then start 604 Records. What was the process of that?
I'm glad you added that qualifier that at that point things started to go quickly because we had been, you know, trying to get things going for them for years. I mean, that would have been, I think, well, I'm in my 30, oh God, like my 32nd year with them, I think, 32 years. And the first five, um, nothing happened. I mean, we had a little bit of success locally. Um, but boy, I got to tell you, that was a lonely ride that first 5 years. I mean, we all believed in each other, and I never really lost hope. I always thought sooner or later this is going to happen for these. I just knew it. I just felt it. Um, and so when it finally did happen in a weird sort of way, I think we all kind of. It wasn't like we were like pompous about it or cocky about it. But it's funny, like when it all kind of happened, it just made sense. It didn't feel like, oh, we got lucky or, oh, it was like, all right, we knew we were going to get there and we finally got there.
Mm-hmm.
And now I can't remember what your question was. What's your question?
How 604 came together?
Ah, okay. Yeah. So 604. Chad is a workaholic um, like me. And um, the band would go and tour for 8 months, more sometimes. And when they would come home, the other guys would kind of disappear into their domestic lives. But Chad, um, Chad was a different character, and when he'd come home from tour, his idea of vacation was to produce other bands. I think the other guys, when they'd come home from tour, like the last thing they wanted to do was do anything to do with music. And so, Chad would call me, hey, buddy, I just found this band. Um, they're called, whatever. Can you do up a quick contract? I'm going to produce 2 songs. If they get signed, I get X, Y, and Z. So I would crank out these contracts for him with these local bands. Excuse me. One of the bands was called, well, I can't remember the name, unfortunately, but oh, it's going to drive me crazy. Anyways, it was just another one of these bands that I did up some paperwork and Chad recorded a few songs and it didn't really work out. Um, um, and nothing really ever worked out. I mean, the only thing that ever seemed to work out in those early days was, the Nickelback stuff as that was starting to progress.
Mm-hmm.
Um, he called me one day, Chad, and said, "Remember that band? Oh, it's going to drive me crazy. I can't remember their name. Um, remember that band so and so?" I said, "Yeah, yeah, yeah." He said, "Well, they changed their name. They're called Default now, and they got a new singer. And I hear he's really good looking and great singer. And I'm going to go see them tonight at Studebaker's. Do you want to come with?" And I said, "Yeah, I'll come with." So we both went to see this band who are now called Default, and the singer's Dallas Smith, who of course went on to have quite a great career as a country musician as well.
Mm.
Um, we um, we went to this show, and they were great. I mean, that was the first time Dallas, I believe, had ever sung publicly. And I mean, this is just a shithole bar in Burnaby, BC, and um, Chad and I were both like, "There's something here. There's something here." And we approached them immediately after the show and said, "We want to do something with you guys." So we did up a deal. It was just a simple deal. It was like, we're going to record some songs, we're going to shop them, and then we have, I don't know, like 12 months to get you a record deal. And we got him a record deal. And that was with TVT Records in the States. And it was pretty wild for us because we had never done something like that before. We had never succeeded on something like that before. And it was exciting. Um, but of course, my brain being what it is, right away I was like, man, if we had structured that a little bit differently, if we had done that a little bit differently, we could have made more money. Shock the day. That's what they were called. God, it's driving me crazy. Shock the day. Um, if we had done structured that agreement a little bit differently, we could have, made more money. We could have, I was learning more because remember, I was still pretty new at the entertainment law stuff, and I just kind of note to self, next time we're going to do it a little different. So fast forward a year and a half later, maybe, um, and we met Tyler Connolly from Theory of a Deadman at a party. Um, my recollection is that he came to the party because he heard we were going to be there, and he gave us each a cassette, which I think I still have somewhere. And we both listened to it. And I remember calling Chad and being like, "Did you listen to that Theory of a Deadman cassette?" And he's like, "Yeah, yeah. Did you?" I said, "Yeah." And I said, "What'd you think?" And he said, "I like it. What do you think?" I said, "I really like it. Like, I think they're really good." And Chad was like, "Well, why don't we do like we did with Default?" And I was like, "No, no, 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 no. This time we're going to do it different." And I incorporated the company that ended up being 604. Um, but to be clear, the idea at that point was not to start a record company. It was just a production company. But the thing is, I had learned a lesson from that Default situation, and that was if we had had more records worth of rights, we would have been in a much better position financially. Because, on the Default deal, I probably worked for a year and a half on that. And I think at the end of the day, Chad and I split $25,000, which is not a great payday for a year and a half's work. Um, so I did up a production agreement with Theory. It was like, I think, a 4 or 5 record production deal where basically we had to get them a deal, and we would participate financially on all the records. Um, so, but again, the idea wasn't we're starting a record label. It wasn't that at all. So I went out to LA. I was managing a band called Lilacs, who were 4 young women from Cranbrook, BC, who had been signed to Madonna's label, Maverick. And at the same time, I was shopping these Theory of a Deadman demos around because Chad had recorded maybe 3 songs or something. And I'm going around to record companies, knocking on doors. Hey, I want to play this for you. And this is before How You Remind Me. So some people knew who Nickelback was, but they weren't a household name. And, I was shopping these demos around, and some A&R guys I met with didn't even know who they were. Oh, yeah, I think I've heard of Nickelback. Because I'm like, this was produced by Chad from Nickelback. Some guys were like, yeah, I think I know who that is. Some people didn't know who they were. But I met with a guy named Tom Storms, who was an A&R guy at Atlantic. And he said, "Oh yeah, I love that band. I know Nickelback." He's like, "What did Chad have to do with this?" I said, "He produced it." He's like, "Okay, cool." And he called me a day or two later, and he said, "Hey man, I just want to be clear about something. Are you shopping Theory of a Deadman as a band, or are you shopping your label?" And I had never really thought about it like that. I mean, if he hadn't said that or asked that at that moment in time, I don't even know if 604 would exist. And if you're watching this, Tom, don't come back and sue me now for something. But no, Tom's a great guy. Tom's a great dude. And I was like, it was like slow motion. It was just like label. And he's like, "Okay, dude, cool. I'll call you tomorrow." And I remember calling Chad and being like, "Hey, man, I think I just started a bidding war on our label." And I remember Chad saying, what label? Like, what are you talking about? I was like, the paper we have, A Theory of a Deadman. I'm like, don't worry about it. And then really the perfect storm happened. This is 2001. Um, the default song comes out, goes to number one, big worldwide hit. Hi Remind Me comes out, goes to number one, big worldwide hit. Hero from Spider-Man comes out, goes to number one, big worldwide hit. And then the second single from Silver Side Up came out, Too Bad, I think it was. And that goes top 10 or top five or something. And so all of a sudden, everybody's looking at us like we're the godfathers of some, neo grunge movement in Vancouver. And the phone just starts ringing. And this was right when 9/11 happened. Silver Side Up came out on 9/11, like that day. And so the planes, I don't know if you're old enough to remember, but the planes were grounded for a while after 9/11, maybe a week or 2 weeks. And as soon as planes were flying again, we got on a plane because every label wanted to talk to us about our actually non existent label. Um, and we flew out. We met with L.A. Reid. We met with Clive Davis. We met with everybody. And we ended up doing a deal with Leor Cohen. Leor's still around. Leor is now the head of Google Music.
Hmm.
But at that time, he was the head of Island Def Jam. And they had a deal with Roadrunner. And I think because Nickelback was on Roadrunner, Case, who was the owner of Roadrunner, I think there was no way he was going to let us take our label somewhere else. So we did the deal with them. That's how we got our seed money, was through Island Def Jam and Roadrunner. And I said the only deal breaker on this deal is we own Canada. Anything that happens in Canada, we own. That's not negotiable. That's not for sale. And they agreed. And that was it. That's how 604 started. Kind of all on a bluff in a way because there really wasn't a label. But yeah, it was just like that.
Yeah, absolutely. And now, of course, it's a proper record company. Who are some of the artists you've got signed right now?
Okay, right now, um, well, I'll just go through the list, I guess, of like I'm just looking around my office at the plaques and everything. Well, obviously, first band we saw was Theory of a Deadman, um, Dallas Smith, Carly Rae Jepsen. We are the ones who originally put out "Call Me Maybe," and then that got picked up by Interscope. Marianas Trench, Coleman Hell, Jojo Mason, Hotel Mira, the Zolas, the Gins. I'm sure I'm forgetting people.
Yeah. I actually saw Coleman Hell here in Calgary last year,
Oh, nice.
at the Stampede City Sessions, which is the PBS show that they film out here.
Yeah, we've
So,
had a few bands. We're close with the Webbers
yep.
who put all that on the Weber Academy or whatever it is, and
Hmm.
we've had quite a few bands doing that show.
Yeah. And I wanted to ask about kind of going back because, of course, you mentioned "Call Me Maybe," which, yeah, was just a smash hit. And like, of course, you've had Nickelback, you've been with affiliated with artists that have reached the top of the mountain like that. But was it pretty surreal to experience that with your own record label?
Yeah. Yes is the short answer. It's a hell of a thing when something like that happens, and it's such a public facing business, which is when you have a huge success like that is great because you feel like you're on top of the world. Um, and you kind of are because everybody knows the song, everybody knows the artist, everybody knows. But the downside is when something doesn't work out, everybody knows that too. But yes, that was a whirlwind of a year. It's still shocking to me. I'll once in a while I'll go onto YouTube and look up all the cover versions and all the, because if you remember, it really became almost like a meme. Like it was like everybody from the Olympic swimming team to Barack Obama had versions of it out there. Um, it was wild, man. Like it really was wild. But like a lot of things in this business, there's good and bad. Like when good things happen, bad things happen, and without getting into the details, because I've signed 8 million NDAs about it. It ruined a lot of relationships. When money gets involved, what did Biggie Small say? Mo money, mo problems, and that's kind of true. And listen, I'm so thankful for that song. Um, that song is why we own the building that we're in. Um, that song opened so many doors. That song pays salaries of employees here. Um, it's still hard for me to fathom and process. But I've been lucky, like I've been involved with a lot of really, really big hits. And it's never something you take for granted. It's something that you want to repeat, but it's hard to repeat, maybe impossible to repeat. So when it happens, it's almost like a lightning strike. It's so rare, or like winning Lotto 649. Like it's so rare, and it's almost like when it's happening, you don't even really know it's happening, and then later you kind of process it after it's all kind of settled down. But I believe it's still in the top 3 or 4 biggest selling digital singles in history. It's still super active. Barely a day goes by that there isn't some kind of email about it or use granted, or it's really wild. It just never dies.
Yeah. Yeah. And you were with Carly from the beginning, so you saw that whole arc take place, is that right?
She came to me. She was on Canadian Idol, and I believe she came in third on Canadian Idol. Which, funny enough, same with Jacob Hogard from Headley. It seems like the people who came in third were the people who ended up having careers. But so, and remember, this is a long time ago, so it's all a bit blurry. But she got a hold of me and wanted to meet about management, and I think it was right after she was off the show. So I remember having a meeting with her and her dad, and I was a little skeptical about that one because I'm really not a fan of those idol shows. Mm, I don't hate them, but just not my cup of tea.
Hmm.
And so I was a little skeptical. I made certain assumptions because that's how I knew who she was. And there was a lot to like about her. I mean, she was charming and intelligent and pretty and a good conversationalist. And so, we had a lovely little meeting. And I think at the end, she sort of said something like, well, are you interested? And I said, like, yeah. I said, I am interested. I said, but I have to tell you, I really prefer to work with artists who write their own music, um, you know, for numerous reasons. Um, it's more fun for me. And I love that, I'm a bit of a romantic about the music business. So, I mean, I love the fact that somebody can sit in the room and come up with a melody and lyrics and affect the world. I mean, it's crazy to me to think that a song can have so much power. And so, I kind of said to her, look, I really like you. Oh, no pun intended, since she had a song called I Really Like You. I really like you. And I said, but, I really like working with writers. And she said, well, I am a writer. And I said, oh, okay. I didn't know that. I said, I assumed because of Canadian Idol, you probably weren't a writer. And she said, no, 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 I write. In fact, I've got a CD with some of my demos on it. Can I drop it off tomorrow? I said, sure. So she came by the 604, where the 604 office was then, dropped off the CD, and to my recollection, it had most of the songs, or at least versions of most of the songs that ended up on Tug of War, which was her first album. And she wasn't even on the label. I was just managing her. But we put the album out on Maple Music, and it did well. Like, it didn't go through the roof, but I think we had a top 10 hit, a top 15 hit, a couple of videos that did exceedingly well on Much Music, and people noticed. She got a couple of Juno nominations, and it was like, okay. But when it came time for the second record, she approached us and said, like, I'd rather be on the label, because I think it was a bit of a romantic notion for her to start her own label and put it out herself. But of course, that also means she's got to spend all the money. And I think she was like, I don't want to spend all that money. And, and I think, to be honest, on the first record, I ended up spending all the money anyway as her manager. I don't think she really had any money. And we said, okay, sure. We had some success there. Why not? Let's put you on 604. So we put her on 604, and the first record we did was Kiss with Call Me Maybe. And I put her with Josh Ramsey from Marianas Trench. He produced it and co-wrote it. He had also produced and co-wrote a song on the first album, Tug of War, called Sour Candy, which is a great song. And for those of you who are interested, or either fans of Marianas or Carly or both, that video is up. It's been up the whole time. It's called Sour Candy is the name of the song. Great song, funny video. And yeah, I listen, I wouldn't sign somebody I didn't believe in, but I had no idea that Call Me Maybe was going to do what Call Me Maybe did. That was a shock for everybody concerned.
Yeah.
And it happened so quickly. Like, at first it didn't happen quickly. We put it out in Canada, and it started to go up the charts. And I think we put it out in October, if I remember correctly, maybe October 2012. And it's going up the chart, and all of a sudden it really started to go up the chart, to the point where Christmas week it was number one in Canada. Justin Bieber just happened to be home for Christmas in Stratford and heard it on the radio. He tweeted this tweet with a picture of him and Selena Gomez saying, and I think he said, "This is the catchiest song I've ever heard." And then boom. Now the song was already starting to explode before Bieber. In fact, we were already negotiating an agreement with Universal France, because for some reason it had really blown up in France. I'm not even sure why. I seem to remember there was a blog maybe that, I can't remember why. I remember the video really blew up in France. And we were that close to doing a deal with Universal France until Bieber tweeted. And when Bieber tweeted, boom, every record label in the world was calling, and people were flying in. And next thing you knew, that's, yeah.
Yeah. It's, I remember when it came out, because I was in middle school at the time. And like, even back then, I was more kind of, I guess, an old soul. I liked the Beatles and that sort of thing. But it was, like, you knew that song. Everyone knew that song when it came out. So, yeah.
Yeah, it's really unbelievable. I mean, I'm not exaggerating when I say that every single day there's some business on that song.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes it's something small, like a compilation record in South Africa. Sometimes it's something peculiar, like a soap commercial in Poland. And sometimes it's something just awesome, like, it got licensed recently for the next Paul Thomas Anderson film, which, I mean, it's probably my favorite director. And it's a thrill when something like that happens.
Yeah.
But it's really unbelievable how many uses it gets. It's everywhere, and I don't think it's going anywhere. I just don't think it's going anywhere. I think it's
Yeah.
around, and I always say to my kids, long after I'm gone, you'll be thinking of me every time that song goes on the radio.
Yeah, for sure. Now, kind of getting more into like the business of the label, what does your day to day look like?
You're kind of looking at it right now. Um, I'm sitting in my office right now, and I'm here a lot. I tend to do two shifts. I come in usually around noon, work till around 5 or 6, go home, see my wife, see my kids, see my dog. But then I come back for the night shift, and that's really where the work happens. I will come back at 9:30, change into my pajamas and slippers, make a pot of tea, roll a few joints, and I laser focus and just boom. I'm just because I get it's gross, but I get, well, let's see how many emails. I haven't really done much email today because I had to do something with my wife, but yeah, I've got 277 emails today that I haven't read. So
Hmm.
I spend a lot of time on email, and my job is a real mixed bag, because sometimes I'm dealing with some band crisis. Sometimes I'm drafting contracts for Nickelback. Sometimes I'm drafting contracts for 604. Sometimes I'm just sitting here thinking up, you know, interesting new ways to market music. Um, my brain's really perpetual. It just goes, 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 goes. And I always have ideas about things. That doesn't mean they're good ideas. A lot of times they're not, but I'm constantly spitting out ideas. And like I have a place on my computer and my phone where if I get an idea about something in the middle of the night or whatever, I just, I'll type it up and, and that's in a way why the company has grown as big as it's grown because I'll come up with some idea and I'll put it into motion. And when it works out, then I got to hire a bunch of people. Like, our comedy division, for example. I had no idea that was going to become such a huge part of our company when I started it, but it's become a huge part of our company. And now I have 1, 2, 3 staff who are devoted to comedy. Um, so yeah, that's and I know that from the outside, 604 can be confusing to people because like a lot of labels, like indie labels, tend to do one thing, and that's fine. I have no problem with that. Like some labels do nothing but surf punk or whatever, and that's fine. I don't judge that. But that's not 604. 604 has always been very non-genre specific. We've had success in country, we've had success in pop, we've had success in rock, we've had success in alternative. About the only thing we've never really dabbled in is hip hop, and not really for any good reason. It's just not something that you know is one of my favorite types of music. So, when you look at that roster, a lot of it's just because I have a lot of different tastes, and I never wanted to be a label that just did one thing. That's not fun to me because part of this is just about me wanting to have fun with what I do, and that was the same thing with comedy. I love comedy. I always have. And when we started that, I didn't know it was going to grow into this huge part of our company, and I'm so glad it has. um, I started an ambient label because over the pandemic I found myself in my office alone a lot, and I was listening to a lot of ambient and classical music. And then I started to, again, it's just the way my brain works. I went from simply enjoying it to going, is there a business there? Is there a business model there? I was sort of listening to these playlists. Like I'd come into my office and I would just search on Spotify, like study or focus. And I'll be damned, there's all these playlists that come up. And I start to think about it and go, here's this playlist. Like they have a playlist, I think, called like Deep Focus. Here's this playlist. it's got like 8 million followers. I don't know any of these artists. I don't even know any of them. It's like all these sort of generic sounding artists making ambient music. I thought it was fascinating. I was fascinated by that. And so I started an ambient label. Now it's doing well, called Intraset. And yeah, that's just kind of the story of this label. I would love to lie to you and tell you, oh, it was all a master plan and I knew exactly what I was doing. And but that would be a lie. Um, I just am an entrepreneur, and I really like trying different things, and I love a challenge, and um, and I think I'm good at reacting to the moment. Um, I don't let myself get paralyzed by fear or indecision, which isn't to say I don't experience fear and indecision. I do, but I try not to let that rule my decision making process. And so like example, the first country artist we ever had was an artist named Jessie Farrell. And, I had the most fortuitous meeting with her. I was literally buying shampoo. She was the salesperson. She said, "Hey, aren't you the guy who owns 604?" And I said, "Yeah." And she said, "I'm an artist. Can you do me a favor? Can you just wait here? I live like on the next block. I want to give you a demo." And she asked her boss for permission. And so he runs to her apartment, runs back, gives me this demo. And I said, okay, cool. So I took it back to the office and I listened to it and I loved it. Now, I didn't in my brain go, oh shit, this is country. I don't really understand how to market country music. I didn't even think about it. It wasn't until after I signed her that I kind of went, oh shit, I need to figure out a little bit about country music. And I did. And she won the CCMA for Female Artist of the Year. And and that began sort of us signing more country artists. So yeah, that's kind of been the way it's worked. I'm really good at reacting to something, and that's really been a lot of the story of 604 is even the story of how it started. Like I said, I mean, if that guy hadn't said what he said in that phone call, um, I wouldn't even have thought to have a label. But I'm quick to react to stuff, I think. And when I see an opportunity, I react quickly. And what my wife likes to say is, I have a good way of seeing an opportunity where maybe other people wouldn't see it.
Hmm. For sure. And just to kind of wrap things up, I'd love to get your take on this because 604, I find, is in an interesting spot where you guys are independent, but you're sort of a little bigger, not quite a major. You're in that sort of middle ground.
Yep,
Do you think that's a good spot to be?
I think it is right now. I think the way the world is right now, it's a great spot to be in. And so, yeah, I mean, because we're not so big that we can't move quickly. Um, if something happens or there's some new platform it's as simple as me going, we're going to do that. And we do it. We, as a company, we don't get paralyzed very often. We'll act quickly on things. Um, but we're big enough that we can do real damage in a good way.
Hmm.
We can really mobilize the whole team, and we have offices in Toronto, we have offices here, we've got people in Victoria, we've got somebody in Montreal, we've got somebody in LA, and then you throw in the chat factor, which just kind of adds a whole nother level to it all. Um, so yeah, we are a funny company that way. We're definitely an indie. It's definitely run like an indie. Um, but yeah, we seem to have our we seem to have power that extends a little beyond what maybe a traditional person would think an indie label is.
Yeah, absolutely. All right. Well, Jonathan, thank you so much for taking the time to be on the podcast. It was great to speak with you. You've had such an amazing career, and I really appreciate it.
Thank you. I appreciate that as well. And yeah, it's always fun to talk about this stuff. And and it's not done yet. I'm still going, and I'm have no plans at this point of retiring or shutting the company down. I'm, in fact, probably more motivated than I've ever been in my life to have more success and to keep this thing going.
Absolutely, yeah. Thanks for tuning in to another episode of Guess That Record. Make sure to leave a 5-star review and tell your friends to check us out. I want to shout out our radio partners currently airing Guess That Record as a syndicated show. CKMS in Kitchener, Ontario, CKXU in Lethbridge, Alberta, and South Devon Sound in Kingsbridge, UK. This summer, Guess That Record will also be airing on KVCU in Boulder, Colorado. So if you're in those markets, be sure to check those stations out to hear the show. If you're with a radio station and you'd be interested in adding Guess That Record to your programming, send us an email to guessthatrecordpodcast@gmail.com. We'd also appreciate it if you follow us on Instagram and TikTok, where our username on both platforms is @GuessThatRecord. And lastly, subscribe to our YouTube channel to see the video versions of these amazing interviews. Remember to keep rocking, and we'll see you on the next episode of Guess That Record.